one person, which is you in this case, and Khaled initially. How do I have, like, if I just want to have like a commemorative shot for the participants, how do I see their pictures?
I think Khaled would have to stop sharing his screen for a moment.
Oh, okay.
Let me stop sharing for a little bit.
Whoops. And then
a
bunch of names. Do you want names, or do you want people to flip off, turn on their cameras for a moment?
It doesn't matter. Either way, it's fine. I'm not going to force people to show a camera, except the committee at the end. I'll encourage them. I can encourage them.
Miriam, are you able to admit people? Where? Yeah, here you go, Noah.
Yes.
But is there a way to have like everybody? Like I only see the top row. Plus you are the man.
You might need to expand your window.
Yeah, you put, Muhammad, you put your view. If you look, there's on top on the right view.
Oh, gallery, yeah, okay.
View, and then you, you can select the view that you would like.
Good. Sounds great. Excellent. Okay, I think we are good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the defense of soon-to-be Dr. Khaled Shenara. So Khaled joined my group in 2016, and today he will be the 49th student to defend his graduate degree. So a very good number, almost 50. The 50th person next is pretty excited, Kurtz. Should be. So Khaled would be the 37th student to defend his PhD. I also had 12 master's theses and degree holders. You know, and a rounded number is 25th as a major advisor of his PhD thesis. I'm particularly proud of Khaled because he worked on a pretty challenging project that I don't have very strong expertise and background on. So this is why we worked with multiple collaborators in this project to help Khaled get trained on biomedical research. And Khaled also had to be subject to multiple interruptions during his PhD, some of them by necessity that happened to all of us with the COVID, others by choice, where he chose to proudly serve this country as active duty member. And, you know, that nevertheless, despite these and other inconveniences, also he did get married during the PhD dissertation less than a year ago, about a year ago. You know, with multiple interruptions, he still managed to do all the necessary research and, more importantly, the writing that is needed to earn his PhD, as I hope he will have to earn it by a successful defense that he will commence right now. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Khaled. Please share your screen and start going over your research.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Dr. Omary, for the great introduction. And thank particles. My name is Khaled Shenara. I work for Dr. Omary at the University of North Texas Chemistry Department. Just to give you a brief introduction, gold has been used throughout history as a medicinal therapy since early 1600. It was believed as elixir of longevity by different scientists. And even in the 19th century, they actually used it for gold nanoparticles. They initially dissolved gold, make it a gold nanoparticles, and give it to patients with cancer diseases. So why gold nanoparticles? Gold nanoparticles share intrinsic optical and electronic properties. These actually result in a phenomenon called localized surface plasma resonance, which is the oscillation of electrons at the interface of the gold nanoparticle produced by electromagnetic energy from a light. So the beautiful thing about the gold nanoparticles is that their size and shape can be adjusted, therefore can be used in different fields. And also the most important part is that the gold nanoparticles can be conjugated or coupled to molecules for drug delivery, diagnostics of cancer treatment, and even detection of recent pandemic virus diseases such as coronavirus. Why we do this? Let's go back to the further picture of cells in human beings. So cells are the building blocks of human beings. They're the reason why we actually have tissues and cells and muscles and actually skeleton shape. They divide and replicate from tissues. Cells contain three major components, which are nucleus that contains genetic information, containing DNA and RNA. They contain the cell membrane, which is the cell wall that contains everything else, and then the cytoplasm, which contains ADP, mitochondria, and other necessity parts of the cells. Cells do mutate and result in drastic effect in their function and shape, and this is why cancer is formed. So cancer is actually formed through different reasons, from environmental factors to actually mutation. So just to give you an overview of what cancer is, cancer has four main types: carcinoma, which is a cancer to the skin; lymphoma, a cancer to the lymph, which is the lymph system; leukemia, cancer to the blood cells; and then sarcoma, which is a cancer in the fat tissues. So there is different types of cancers, and I'm actually going to be talking about two types in my project, carcinoma and lymphoma. But before I do that, I want to go over a brief overview of the types of blood cells. We all know that there's two types of blood cells. There is red blood cells and white blood cells. White blood cells are responsible for immune system, whereas red blood cells actually carry oxygen. The way the blood cells initiate is through blood stem cells, which are branched into two main types: lymphoid stem cells and myeloid stem cells. The myeloid stem cells give out the red blood cells, whereas the lymphoid stem cells give out lymphoblasts, which actually give the T lymphocytes, natural killer cells, and plasma cells. And these are the white blood cells. Just to mention this, that there's two types mainly. There's B cell and T cell. B cells are responsible for generation of antibodies. These antibodies are in turn used in T cells to recognize the foreign bodies in the bodies and to attack them for immunity. There are two types of leukemia. One is acute myeloid leukemia, AML, and the other is actually called ALL, acute lymphoid leukemia. Unfortunately, the ALL has less cases annually, about 4,000 cases. And this reason for early death because it is a more dangerous disease to have and happens more often in children. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to be talking about how cells mutate and replicate to form tissues. As you can see on the left-hand side, these normal cells replicate through DNA replication. If there's nothing wrong with the DNA, we get a cell division in healthy tissue. If there's anything wrong with the genetic information within the DNA, it gives us a mutated cell and therefore a mutated tissue or a malignant tumor. So there is a problem overall. We know that cancer, so why we do this is because cancer is actually a second leading cause for death in the world. And only in the United States annually, we get about estimated of 2 million cases That's a lot. And in the States, about 1 million deaths every year. And only in the state of Texas, we get about 44,000 deaths only in Texas. So there is a rise in this cancer problem that we all face with all the unhealthy lifestyles that we have and mutated cells. And we all know that the chemotherapy has been aggressive for a lot of patients and very costly. On the other hand, surgeries were not actually effective in remitting cancers. So we know that nanotechnology is actually another therapy that we could use and utilize to treat cancer. So today I'm going to be talking about PPTT. I'm going to be talking about that in the next slide. But before, I was assigned this project, which is like Dr. Omary said, it's kind of difficult to experience as a chemist. But first thing I actually looked into was cells. What are cells? What they get? And I was able to find that the cells have something called EPR, enhanced permeability and retention effect. What that is the ability of nanoparticles to accumulate on the cells, and the cells in turn to be able to uptake them or internalize them. So for that to happen, we have to have certain criteria for the nanoparticle. Literature indicated that the best and optimal size for nanoparticle is about 100 nanometers, up to 100 nanometers. That's the total size of the gold nanoparticle in case we use gold, and the stabilizer. And to actually target this, the best way to engineer and design these nanoparticles is through the following. Looking at this figure on the left-hand side, we see there is different things on the surface of the nanoparticle. One way to actually design a nanoparticle is to add a protein antibody, a protein cellular targeting. So that is an antibody that specifically binds to the cell. Or we can add a ligand that could deliver to the organelle in case it's like a tissue. Or we could directly add a metal particle to the nanoparticle. Or we can functionalize it with amide carboxylate and of course add PEG polyethylene glycol. Remember that the size and shape of these gold nanoparticles do affect the mechanism of which cells are actually going to uptake the gold nanoparticles. And again, it always depends on the type of cell. So I want to give you a brief introduction of what I'm doing in my project one. I'm going to be looking at a carcinomic cell type, stomach cancer. So the title of this project is photothermal therapy utilizing gold nanoparticles. A brief background of this is that we actually know that stomach cancer is very, very hard to treat. Unfortunately, one of our members passed away with stomach cancer, Dr. Osama. And we know that the surgeries to remove this type of cancer is hard. Sure. And I know we all know that it's effective method to treat cancer. However, strategies to remove these tumors in poorly accessible sites is hard. Another example is lymphoma, which is a cancer in lymph node or in the white blood cells. It is barely impossible to do a surgery for white blood cells to be removed, right? So we need to find another alternative way to fight cancer and get remission out of it. So PPTT is a plasmonic photothermal therapy. What this is, it is a minimally invasive therapy, which is in a way using a photon to convert it into heat sufficient enough to form a cellular hypothermia, to kill the cancer cell, selectively kill the cancer cell. So the idea is to load these tumor cells with gold nanoparticles and then irradiate them with light, which is the near infrared light. We know it's a harmless light, unlike UV-vis light, and to achieve thermal ablation. FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has already approved another therapy called PDT. PDT is photodynamic therapy. What this is, it's using a drug toluene, which generates reactive oxygen species that actually are very unhealthy to not only to cancer cells, but also to healthy cells. So we're using another method here, PDTT, in a way to go over the disadvantage that PDT has. So before I go talk about my project, I want to give a brief background on literature where Groenli et al. Has actually used this therapy on mice. They were able to administer the gold nanoparticles in blood intravenously, and then these gold nanoparticles were accumulating on top of the cancer tissue, he was able to trace these gold nanoparticles using a fluorescent tag and then shine the near infrared light on them and actually kill these cancer tumors and result in remission in mice. So mice with actually radiated gold nanoparticles had better survivability than the mice that didn't. Another literature, Sayed et al., has actually went over this, and they produced different sizes and shapes of gold nanoparticles, 40 nanometer, 50 nanometer, cylindrical, and spherical. And again, they talked about how the size could affect both the thermal energy as well as the cell's uptake. In our method, like chemists, we always do is synthesis. So what I did is I went back to lab, looked at all literature, and I wanted to actually start from scratch. So what I did here is I synthesized the gold nanoparticles, and this is, by the way, a brief outline of what I'm going to be talking about. So throughout my presentation, I'm going to be talking about synthesis of gold nanoparticles, and then after that, I'm going to be doing cell culture of different types of cell lines, and then I'm going to be labeling these cells with a 50 fluorescein isocyanate. And then after I label these and make sure that the cells are actually uptaking the nanoparticle, on a separate end, I'm going to be loading the gold nanoparticles to the cells and then do the PPTT therapy or irradiation. So, but before we talk about this, I want to actually give a brief acknowledgement of our team members that actually worked on creating gold nanoparticles, Dr. Osama and Dr. Sreeker, who already done this in the past. They were able to produce gold nanoparticles that are edible. And the reason why we say edible, because they're actually non-toxic. We're using a chitosan, they're using a chitosan-based surfactant that is non-toxic and extracted from shrimp. And then, as you can see here on the left-hand side, they actually get the gold, cut it and dissolve it in acid, and it turns to white. And then if you shine light to it, you actually form the gold nanoparticles. The good thing is, throughout research, our team members found that you don't need to shine a light to actually get a nanoparticle. It was found out that overnight, you can actually get a gold nanoparticle. And I myself tried this with actually 2 hours without radiation. I got the gold nanoparticles. And then they actually looked at the toxicity of these gold nanoparticles on cells. And at several different dilutions of our gold nanoparticles, they showed no toxicity to cells, unlike CTAB surfactant, a known surfactant, which resulted in toxicity to the cells, as you can see in the green here, at different dilutions, in compared to a positive control Triton X. They also looked at the drug release of these gold nanoparticles. Let me admit this first real quick. They also looked at the drug release at different temperatures, and the drug was released at 35 Celsius. And so not only that the gold nanoparticles could be used to actually treat a cancer, they could also be used to actually carry a drug. So my method to do this, before I actually talk about my method, I want to talk about the possible mechanism. So gold dimethyl sulfate, if you shine light to it, it forms a gold chloride. Gold chloride is a thermodynamically unstable product. And this gold chloride could disproportionate to gold 0 and gold 3. The gold 0 in turn will self-assemble into the nanoparticles, as you can see here, and form our desired nanoparticles. Of course, our desired nanoparticles will be stabilized in a polymer. And the polymer that I used myself was actually polymethyl methacrylate. The way I synthesize this, I start with a monomer, methyl methacrylate, and I add initiator, potassium persulfate, to give me a polymer of methyl methacrylate by itself. I do the same exact recipe, but I add PEG to it, polyethylene glycol. And then, of course, most important step here is to actually add the aminoethyl methacrylamide. This is a necessary step to be able to functionalize the nanoparticle with an amide group here. And this is necessary for actually binding to the cells. So before I talk, my computer got stuck for a little bit. I'm sorry about that. All right, here we go. So I did synthesize these 3 types of gold nanoparticles, these types of PMMA nanoparticles. As you can see here on the left-hand side, we have the methyl methacrylate in the size of 80 to 100. and then methyl methacrylate with amide and with PEG, pre and post dialysis, as you can see, we get around of 80 to 100 nanometer nanoparticle size, which is sufficient, just as literature says, that up to 100 nanometer is essential for cellular uptake. The next step, which is important, is to actually functionalize these nanoparticles. And the way we do this is through a lysine maleimide reaction. Since we already have the NH2 functional group, we're going to treat it with NHS PEG maleimide to give us this product containing the maleimide, and then later we add the protein. The protein in turn will add to the maleimide reaction. The protein is a bovine serum albumin and a 50-BSA. So I'm going to be doing two different sets of experiments, one that contains the albumin by itself and the other that contains the 50-BSA. So this strategy can actually be expanded to different types of cells, such as pancreatic cancer cells, because we know albumin BSA here has a Trojan horse effect to pancreas. So this is a good, this is a very good project for new members that they actually want to conduct it. The other strategy that I actually looked at was a different type of cells. So this strategy was used for B-type cells. And so it does require a simple conjugation, whereas the T cell, it actually requires a sophisticated type of conjugation to the nanoparticle. And the reason why I say it's sophisticated, because it requires more steps and different proteins added to it. So in this step, I'm adding biotin avidine conjugation to be able to bind to the antibody of the cancer cell. In this method, I'm going to be talking about the T cell, lymphomic cell used in ALL disease. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to be talking about the results because I did produce a lot of different slides. But the take-home message here is that this strategy can be really global, such that we vary the URCAS antibody to different, targeted cells. So we can use exact conjugation strategy to different cells and to bind to the antibody, which is necessarily highly expressed in the other cancer cells. But going back to my stomach cancer, I want to show you how I actually approach this method. So after I synthesize, I'm talking here about labeling these nanoparticles. So on the left-hand side, I'm showing the nanoparticle plus albumin, that's the control. And I took a macroscopic images, and these are fluorescent images. So since the albumin does not have a 50, it's not going to fluoresce, so we're not going to see anything under green light. On the other hand, we know that the 50 is going to be fluorescing at green light, and so it actually did. So this indicates that the nanoparticles are actually uptaking the 50 part. So labeling is working. So the next step here is to actually be able to control the size and the amount of nanoparticles needed for the cells. So I did dose these cells at 4 hours at 37 Celsius degrees at 5% carbon dioxide, and I did do a flow cytometry. As you can see here on this figure, there's different concentrations, 25 micrograms to 2000 micrograms. And initially, the 25 microgram resulted in 60% uptake for the cells, and 50 actually was able to achieve 100% cellular uptake. Remember, these are normalized cellular uptake because they're based on the volume. So having said this, I actually want to minimize the amount of nanoparticles dosed to the cells. So I was able to actually stick with this concentration, 50 microgram per ml, over my gold loading techniques and radiation, of course. So the next step here that is completely separate from labeling is to actually, instead of just adding 50, we're adding the gold nanoparticles. So in this step, the same exact method is used, but instead of 50, we're adding gold. And we're actually using a harmless light and a filter. This filter is actually removing the UV light and blue light to result in an amber visible light and a little bit of near infrared light. And so what I do here is I'm using a halogenic lamp, mercury lamp, to actually do the radiation studies. And actually it did work. At different power densities of this lamp, I was able to reduce the percent of viable cells of SNU5 cells. SNU5 cells are from cancer of the stomach. And I was able to radiate them at different densities. As you can see here, 55, almost like 60%, 90, almost to 50%. This is literally right after radiation. I'm getting a low number of viable cells radiated. As you can see here in red or the maroon color, the SNU5s only without gold nanoparticles radiated, they're actually resulting in 100% viability. Whereas the green curve here is showing that the gold nanoparticles are being used to radiate the cells, and the cells in turn are actually not viable with more power density for the light. As you can see, we used the 515 nanometer filter, and the method worked. This is an image of the cells before irradiation, and this is the image of the cells after irradiation. As you can see, they're actually being obliterated and disrupted. With this, I wanted to actually expand my method to look at what is the effective time on the cells. So if I irradiate the cells, what's going to happen? We know that the doubling time for SNU5 cells is 2 days, 48 hours. So I want to see the effect of these gold nanoparticles radiation to the cells. And as you can see, after 6 hours, I'm getting almost 40% cell viability for SNU5 cells. After 24 hours, almost like 35%. And then I do the same exact method over 0, 16, 24, and 48 hours. As you can see, there is a potential decrease in the cell viability to almost 0 at the 48 hours. So this method is working. Looking at the dead cells control, I'm using hydrogen peroxide, they're almost the same. So I'm actually getting a good result here. I'm getting these cancer cells to be killed by PBTT. On another note to take is that the cells with the gold nanoparticles, they're not dying unless you shine light to them. As you can see here, after 24 hours, we actually have an increased cell viability. To conclude, PPT therapy was proved successful. SNU5 cancer cells containing gold-loaded acrylate nanoparticles were irradiated at different densities, and the number of viable cells were reduced significantly over a short period of time. And after 48 hours, the cell viability goes to almost 0 with the irradiation gold nanoparticles. These are some pictures with the 0 milliwatt per centimeter power density and 50 and 100. As you can see, there is an evident change in the cell's morphology, leading to hypothermia and killing of the cell. And this is again another pictures where the top row of images shows the healthy viable cells before irradiation, and the bottom is where the cells were actually irradiated. On another note that I want to talk about, although I am not a computational chemist, but I did want to utilize the facility that UNT actually provides. I wanted to look at what we could do with these cells in a different way. So we only covered the way to target the cells on the surface. So on the surface of the cell, we were able to achieve PBTT. What about another method to actually treat cancer cells? What about, playing with their DNA? So one way to do this is to actually look at the gold complexes that we actually synthesize. But before we want to do that, we actually want to look computationally to see if these gold complexes are good candidates. So I'm looking here for trinuclear frazzolate gold 1 complex that one of our lab members synthesized, and it's actually a good candidate for being intercalator. Before I talk about the intercalators, I want to give you a brief background of what the cells are, what DNA is. We know that the cells contain DNA in the nucleus, and DNA is actually the place where it codes the genetic instructions for different biological functions. And they're the reason why the cells are replicating. So DNA contains 2 nucleic base pairs, adenine thymine, AT, and guanine cytosine, GC. DNA is converted to RNA through transcription, and then in turn, RNA is converted to protein through translation. So the way the nucleotide base pairs are organized actually encrypts for the coding for these products to determine the outcome proteins. On the other hand, DNA intercalation is a process where a drug or intercalator is inserted into DNA. And so in cancer cells, these intercalators can be used. And the way they could be used is actually, they could be intercalated within the DNA and then result in structural perturbation of these helical DNA that results in unwinding and actually inhibiting the DNA from replication. So instead of just looking at the surface of the cells, we could actually embed these gold complexes or intercalators through the cargo of the nanoparticle. Another project could be done, you know, and to actually inhibit the DNA of the cancer cells selectively for the cancer cells. But this is, of course, going to be done later on with a different student. Just to show you what adenine thymine looks like, so I did obtain the crystal structures of these adenine thymine, guanine, cytosine. Of course, I minimized their energy. And then I looked at the gold primer. These are my intercalators. Gold primer, ethidium. Ethidium is a common intercalator used in different studies. Lipticine is a common intercalating cancer drug. It's used for intercalating in cancer DNA. So I'm going to be comparing these two systems with our gold primer. So the way to do this is utilizing two methods. The first method is actually vertical separation method. In this method, I'm going to be talking about how I'm going to be varying the distance of the adenine thymine or guanine cytosine nucleoside base pairs with our intercalator. So I'm going to be minimizing the energy first of all, and then obtaining the interaction energy between these two systems. And how I'm going to do this is varying the distance between this system and our intercalator system. And the next method I'm going to be talking about later. But for now, let's look at some structures so we don't get lost. This is the guanine cytosine with the lipticine. And as you can see, the lipticine and our drug actually fulfill the intercalating drug system, which is containing pi systems. Of course, intercalation has different ways and mechanisms to bind. We haven't fully known as a scientist to know the process, but for now, let's just look at the structures overall. So I did minimize the energies for AT ethidium and the trimer. In this slide, I actually wanted to get an ideal basis set, an ideal functional to use throughout my my work computationally. And I actually want to thank Dr. Shenara and their group members. They're the ones who actually helped me with this because I didn't have any idea how to do it. They're the ones who suggested to use SDD WB97XD instead of the LSDA. LSDA is used in literature. And I actually did, and I found that with varying the distance, I'm getting lower interaction energy for both the ethidium and our trimer for both systems. So I decided to actually stick with this functional, the WB97XD, because it actually outperforms the LSDA. Again, I did different, I did a comparison between our intercalator, our complex with the lipticine, a common intercalator, and a ethidium, and I'm seeing a lot lower interaction energy while varying the distance using our gold primer, indicating stronger pi interaction energies. Of course, the project is never done here. I wanted to see the effect of physiological pH on our drug. So I went ahead and deprotonated all the hydroxyl groups on our gold primer. And then again, I compared the results while varying the distance. So I did vary the distance here from 3.2 all the way to 4.3 angstroms, and I'm getting even better interaction energies, lower energies with our deprotonated form of gold primer than actually the protonated one. Again, I'm looking at the different method here. It's called the twist angle calculations. Here, I'm actually twisting the drug from the base pairs on a 60-degree increment from all the way from 0 all the way to 360. So I'm like at every 60 degrees, I'm rotating these drugs to see the effect of energies. And I'm still getting lower interaction energies with our gold primer than ellipticine, both in adenine thymine and guanine cytosine nucleoside base pairs. And this indicates, and proves that our gold primer is actually a possible candidate fit for DNA intercalation. Setting this aside, I wanted to actually see what experimental method could show. So I did look in literature and I found the following equation. This equation is gonna give us the binding constant of our drug to DNA. I'm using here a linear form of DNA. As you can see, this equation is equivalent to y equals mx plus b, where mx is our slope and b is intercept. If we divide the slope by intercept, we get kb. Remember, EA is the extinction coefficient for the apparent molecule. That's when it's not bound, it's free bound. And then EF is the free metal complex extinction coefficient. EB is not known, but we don't need it because if we actually do the division, we ultimately find KB. KB is the value for intercalation. So I looked at electronic absorption spectroscopy here of ethidium bromide, a common intercalator, and I'm adding 85 micromolar ethidium bromide with different liquats of DNA. I use fish sperm DNA here in 0 to 170 micromolar, and I'm seeing a shift in absorption. From this change, I was able to plot the DNA concentration against the DNA over the extension coefficient apparent minus the extension coefficient free. And if I divide the slope by the intercept, I'm getting two different values here. And the average value for KB is 3.58 times 10 to the third premolar. I did the same exact thing with one of our gold complexes. It's gold TPPTS3. And this is, again, another good intercalator system. And I'm getting another change in absorption, as you could see here. But here, it actually increases absorption. I use this piece because it's more accurate to use in the absorption law, Beer's law. And then looking at the KB values here, on the other hand, it's a lot more than the ethidium bromide. It's 2.76 times 10 to the fourth premolar, almost 8 times greater than the ethidium bromide. And this actually could indicate the 3 different values for 3 different binding to the linear form of DNA. Again, DNA is not just a pi stacking interaction, could also be electrostatic equivalent depending on the place where minor grooves and major grooves of DNA is binding to. Concluding remarks, I wanna talk about how our gold 3' has actually the lowest interaction energies with the DNA-based pairs, followed by ethidium and then ellipticene. And even the deprotonated one at physiological pH had better values and outperforms the protonated one. And then twist angle calculations actually supported the vertical separation calculations, where it actually concludes that branches in how you can target DNA intercalation, whether using electronic absorption spectroscopy or gel electrophoresis, all of that is done and will be done through the future students. In remarks, I want to thank UNT Chemistry Department for being a great host. I really enjoyed my stay here. I have been for a long time. I want to thank Dr. Omary for accepting me to be his student, and I really enjoyed all these years I spent with him. I want to thank Dr. Manal Rawashdi Omary for continuous support, whether emotional or going through things. I really thank her so much for everything she has offered. Of course, Dr. Kandari for the amazing classes that I took and 6010s that I practiced with them. Dr. Robbie Petrus for continuous support throughout cell projects and for being a great collaborator. Dr. Cisneros, who has left UNT, and their group members for helping me extensively in this computational work that I did. Of course, my committee members, Professor Skellum and Dr. Valson, Dr. Skellum. NSF Grant and Wells Foundation for generous funding. Of course, all these Dr. Omary groups. And last but not least, my wife, who has supported me through every single step in the process of writing and even graduation. Of course, my parents were actually sitting right now. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Khaled. Thank you for obeying the time constraints. So, good presentation. Let me ask you to remove your screen, stop sharing your screen. And let me ask the audience, those of you who don't mind turning your camera on, please do, so we can have a picture to commemorate the event. So please turn your camera on. I will take some images of that, and I will ask you in the meantime if you have any questions, because the tradition is to have the audience, besides the committee members, to ask questions if they have any, and then we will excuse everybody except the committee, and then we will have the closed Q&A with them. So yeah, if anybody has any question, please ask. just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. First comes, first serve.
Still waiting.
Yeah, this is the first and only defense, graduate defense from my group in the Zoom era. So on the one hand, I'm a little disappointed that we didn't do it in person, but on the other hand, the COVID is a real thing, and we all went through it. So it's good to have at least one defense using Zoom to commemorate our the event.
And I'm sure my parents are watching it. They wanted to ask questions. Please go ahead.
Yeah, let's
Hopefully
see
it's a
if
good
there's
one.
any scientific question first by anybody in the audience besides the committee. Don't be shy.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yep.
I was just curious how much total gold ended up being in this. I saw kind of the shaved coin, and I figured because it's at a molecular scale, probably not very much, but if you do lots of trials, it could add up.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the entire question. Your voice is a little bit low. What about the gold nanoparticles?
I was just wondering how much total material went into them ultimately. Since you're doing this on the nano scale, I assume there would be some waste in the process, but at the same time, it was probably pretty efficient.
Right. So in this method, we're not actually doing internalization. We're actually doing the surface uptake for the cells. So we're looking at this, how much of the cell could uptake on the surface instead of internalization. So we don't care for internalization because we know that the interface of the gold nanoparticles is enough to destruct the cellular wall of the cells. So we didn't do any internalization within the cell, just on the surface. And 50 microgram per milliliter was enough to actually get 100% cellular uptake.
Yeah, it's a very small amount then.
Have you done mass spectrometry at all in any of your samples?
Unfortunately, I wish I actually did mass spectrometry to see where these gold nanoparticles end up, whether it's on the cellular level or not, but I didn't have the facility at the time, and I wish I did.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay.
Ahmed, I would like to thank Khaled's parents for attending. It's been a while since I've seen them, and thank you so much and congratulations. Hopefully everything will go well. And I now understand why we have the Zoom, I guess, just to have, this is one of the benefits, I assume, that the parents who cannot attend, and I was touched by your acknowledgement and by your some of the parts of your thesis. So I'm glad to see your parents and wish everybody everywhere the best. Thank you so much. Because I know I'm not going to get to see them after that. We will go to a separate room. And thank you for the wonderful presentation. It was very articulate. So I'm sure your parents will be very proud of you. Thank you so much.
Yes, Ghassan and Bisan, I saw your dad earlier, but he's no longer here.
Yeah, thank you. We are very proud about Khaled, and actually this is your support and your team support, and really thank you for everything. We are very happy about this.
Our great pleasure. And
thank you.
Tell your dad, since he's no longer here, tell him that inshallah I delivered the promise that I made to him. I told him, Khaled Bragbati.
Inshallah.
Khaled is in my neck, literal translation.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. We really
promise
appreciate
to
that.
take care of him, to guide him toward ending his PhD. So,
Inshallah. Really, thank you. Thank everyone right here. Thank you so much.
It's not quite yet. It's not time to raise the mission accomplished, because the closed session will entail like a grilling session with the committee. So he will have to defend that. It's not
right
for granted, but inshallah he'll do well.
He will do it, inshallah. Inshallah.
Yeah. Just tell my regards to your dad and mom, please.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
تسمعني دكتور؟
Yes.
سامعني. اوكي. اشكرك من كل قلبي هذه الجهود العظيمه، وفي نفس الوقت يعني بصراحه اشكر كل اللجنه اللي معك، وبالتحديد ايضا الدكتور منال. يعني شفنا فرحه في وجهها كانها عبرت عن فرحتنا الشخصيه بصراحه. النقطه الثانيه، really we are the student parents for your colleagues. Express our happiness for Khaled Defense about this, and we hope then that he can do the best for other students in your university also. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. إن شاء الله ما خيبنا أمالك، بس أنا وعدتك إنه خالد بركبتي إن شاء الله. I'll take care of him, and inshallah, maybe an hour from now, you will get the good word. Thank you very much for joining us from 3,000 miles away, from, I don't know how many miles away, from all the way in Palestine. So.
مرحبا دكتور عمري، الدكتورة منال، أكيد مرحبا لكل اللجنة. إحنا كتير فخورين بأنه الدكتورة خالد تحت إشراف الدكتور العمري. الدكتور العمري له باع طويل في هذا الموضوع، احنا مبسوطين ان هذا الاستاذ المشرف العظيم على فكره اللي راح يتخرج على ايديه ابننا، اللي بنتمنى له كل توفيق دكتور. وشكرا كل قلبي لكم جميعا. شكرا للجنه.
يسلموا شكرا كثير. Thank you very much, and our best wishes, and I would like to ask everybody now to leave unless there is a last minute question. So everybody please leave the chat room, and it's only the committee, Dr. Skillam, Dr. Kandari, Dr. Valson, and Dr. Rawash Omary, and I.